All right, buckle up for this one, because today we're diving headfirst into a story that's wilder than any prison movie you've ever seen.
Seriously, we're talking about a prison break gone wrong in ways you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, the Great Leavenworth Prison Break of 1931.
A story so unbelievable, so packed with twists and turns, that it makes you wonder if those escapees actually had a plan at all.
We'll be unpacking this wild tale using a fantastic recounting we found on the My Favorite Murder podcast.
They really dug deep into this one. And trust me, it's a story you won't want to miss.
So let's set the scene right. 1931, the heart of the Depression, crime is running rampant across America.
And picture Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas, one of the most notorious federal prisons in the country. Think Alcatraz, but smack dab in the middle of America.
A real who's who of infamous criminals were locked up there.
And overseeing this whole operation, we have Warden Thomas B. White.
Well, this guy is straight out of a Western novel.
Right. Texas Ranger, Pinkerton agent, FBI investigator. This guy had seen it all.
Known for bringing order to chaos. So you know things had to get pretty wild for a prison break to happen on his watch.
Oh, it did. And the ringleaders. 7 of the hardest criminals Leavenworth had ever seen.
The Leavenworth 7, as they were known.
We're talking George Curtis, Grover C. Durrell, Earl Thayer, Will Green, Tom Underwood, Charlie Berta, and Stanley Brown.
These guys weren't messing around. Train robbery, mail theft, assault. You name it, they probably did it.
And for years, they'd been scheming, secretly stashing weapons inside the prison.
I mean, we're talking shotguns, rifles, pistols, even dynamite.
All smuggled in through seemingly innocent supplies, glue, shoe paste, you wouldn't believe it.
Imagine the audacity. Their original plan, though, was to have an outside crew bust them out.
But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Their accomplices botched a bank robbery and got caught.
Talk about bad timing. So here they are stuck with a mountain of firepower and no way out.
But these guys, they weren't quitters, so they hatched a new plan. A brazen, spur-of-the-moment escape attempt.
And they chose a busy December morning to make their move.
Perfect cover, right? Lots of activity, people coming and going.
Their first step, a forged hall pass. Curtis, Durrell, and Underwood used it to get into the warden's office area.
And they didn't waste any time. They immediately took the gate officer hostage.
From there, things escalated quickly. They stormed the warden's office, taking more hostages as they went.
And get this, Warden White happened to be meeting with someone very interesting at that very moment.
Ooh, don't leave us hanging.
None other than Fred Barker, of the infamous Barker gang.
You're kidding. What are the chances? It's like something out of a movie.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But amidst all this chaos, Warden White, he's thinking ahead.
Clever guy. He knew they'd want a getaway car, so he stashed his car keys under a rug.
Smart move, but it only delayed the inevitable. The 7, they burst into his office, guns blazing, demanding his car keys.
I can only imagine the tension in that room.
Oh, it was intense. But Warden White, cool as a cucumber, tells them he left the keys in his office.
Was he stalling? Did they really forget about such a crucial detail? We may never know.
Either way, it threw a wrench in their plans. No keys, no Buick.
But they weren't giving up that easily. They grabbed the warden and a handful of other hostages.
A construction foreman, some typewriter repairmen, they were dragging quite the entourage with them.
They reached the front door, but Officer J.H. Dempsey refused to open it.
Even when they threatened to blow the place up with dynamite.
This guy had nerves of steel. But Warden White, always thinking on his feet, he ordered the gate open.
He didn't want any bloodshed, you know. Better to just let him go and deal with it later.
And just like that, they were out. Down the steps they went, prison alarm blaring, hostages in tow. What a sight that must have been.
I bet. But Warden White kept things from escalating further. He convinced the tower guards not to fire on them.
He was one cool customer under pressure. So they make it to the lawn and release most of the hostages, keeping only Warden White.
Still hoping to get that Buick, they marched him towards his house.
But when they got there, no keys, they were foiled again.
Talk about frustrating. Desperate and running out of options, they decided to try their luck on the main road.
Hoping to commandeer a car. Right. And just as luck would have it, a car approached.
And who was in that car? A group of soldiers, fresh from a rabbit hunting trip. Talk about bad timing again.
It was just one of those days, wasn't it?
Wrong place, wrong time for those soldiers, that's for sure. The 7, they took over the car, even got themselves some extra firepower from the soldiers' hunting gear.
So for a minute there, it seemed like things might actually go their way.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But remember those muddy roads we talked about?
Oh yeah, they were in for a bumpy ride.
Literally. Instead of sticking to the main road, they took a detour onto this muddy side path, and guess what? Stuck.
No way, really. They got stuck.
Yep. And this is where their whole plan starts to fall apart.
Like they had this elaborate escape all mapped out, and it all comes down to some mud.
Well, it's more than just the mud, right? They had this
Mm.
rigid plan, and they just couldn't adapt when things went sideways.
So instead of thinking on their feet, they just kept making the same mistake over and over.
Exactly. It's like they were stuck in this loop of bad decisions. Ditch the car, find another car, get stuck again, repeat.
They even tried to steal a car from a school teacher. Right? I mean, talk about desperate.
Oh, yeah, and that didn't go so well either. The teacher flat out refused to give them her keys.
Good for her. But I gotta wonder, what was going through Warden White's mind during all this?
Right. He's being dragged from car to car, stuck in the mud. I bet he was exhausted.
But he never gave up hope, did he? He was always looking for an opportunity. And it came when they stumbled upon a car full of teenagers.
Yeah, talk about a recipe for disaster. One of the teenagers, he peeked back at the commotion, and one of the escapees, on edge, raised his rifle.
Oh no, I bet Warden White knew things were about to get ugly.
He did. He yelled for everyone to run, and in the chaos, he managed to grab a gun himself.
What a move. He was thinking fast.
Quick thinking, but it was pure pandemonium. Hostages scattering, shots ringing out, and Warden White. Well, Will Green blasted him with a shotgun.
Oh my God. That's brutal.
Yeah. The warden went flying into a ditch. Everyone thought he was dead.
So what happened next?
Well, the escapees, they panicked. Their hostages were gone. They thought they'd killed the warden, and they were still stuck with this tiny getaway car.
What a mess.
Total chaos. So they split up. Some ran into the woods. The others piled into the Chevy, hoping to make a clean getaway.
Did they make it?
Not quite. Just as they were about to take off, they saw another car barreling towards them. It was the warden's Buick.
No way. But I thought they didn't have the keys.
They didn't, but the deputy warden did. And he had a posse with him. Oh, and the mayor of a nearby town was in the car too.
The mayor. What was he doing there?
Who knows? It's one of those weird little details that makes this story so unbelievable.
I love it. So what happened? Did they have a showdown?
Oh yeah, full-blown shootout, bullets flying, people getting hit. It was like something out of an old Western movie. And the crazy thing is, nobody died.
Seriously. With all that gunfire,
Yeah.
they were lucky.
Lucky is an understatement. But Will Green, even with a head wound that temporarily blinded him, he managed to speed off in the Chevy.
He finally got away.
Not so fast. You'll never guess what happened. He ended up stuck in the mud, again, on another driveway leading to a farmhouse.
You're kidding me. It's like they were cursed.
I know, right? But this time, one of the escapees, Earl Thayer, he'd had enough. He refused to go through the same cycle of carjackings and dead ends, so he broke away from the group.
Smart move.
Probably. Meanwhile, the remaining three, Curtis, Durrell, and Green, they stumbled onto this farmhouse. The owner, this elderly guy named Emerson Salisbury, he greets them with a cheerful, "Howdy, boys, you going hunting?"
Oh, bless his heart. He had no idea what was going on.
Not a clue. The three escapees, they just barged right past him, taking refuge in his house.
So this is their last stand.
Yeah, it was. The posse caught up and surrounded the farmhouse. It wasn't long before the whole place was under siege. Bullets, bombs, tear gas. They threw everything they had at it.
Oh, Mr. Salisbury. What happened to him?
He actually managed to escape unharmed. His house, not so much. But when the gunfire finally died down, the posse found Curtis, Durrell, and Green dead.
They took their own lives.
It seems that way. A tragic end to their desperate bid for freedom.
What about the others? The ones who fled into the woods?
They got caught, eventually. But even their captures were pretty dramatic. Tom Underwood, as he was being led back to his cell, he casually handed an officer a stick of dynamite.
Wait, what? He just had dynamite on him.
Yep. And he even said something like, "I won't be needing this anymore." Can you imagine?
That's crazy. What about the other two?
Stanley Brown, he tried to blow everyone up with dynamite in a last-ditch effort to escape.
Oh no, did it work?
Nope. The fuse was wet from the rain, so it didn't detonate.
Talk about anticlimactic. And Earl Thayer.
He was found a couple of days later trying to trade his rifle for a cup of coffee. Desperate times. Desperate measures, I guess.
So what happened to them after they were caught?
All 4 surviving members got hit with additional charges. And Leavenworth, well, they did a major security overhaul after that whole debacle.
Well, I bet they did.
Yeah.
But what about Warden White? Did he survive that shotgun blast?
He did. They found him in that ditch, pretty banged up but alive. He made a full recovery, though he never quite regained full use of his left arm.
Wow, what a tough guy. I mean, you'd think after all that he'd want to just retire, maybe take up fishing.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But he didn't. Instead, he ended up heading a prison that was all about rehabilitation.
Really? That's
Hmm.
kind of surprising. Almost like he saw something in those escapees,
Mhm.
something redeemable.
It's possible. Maybe that near-death experience changed his perspective on things. He later went on to serve on the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, too.
So he was all about second chances, huh?
Seems like it. But speaking of second chances, let's talk about Charlie Burda for a minute. The one who ended up working at a bar with a view of Alcatraz after serving time there.
Yeah, what's up with that? It's almost too ironic. Like, was he drawn back to that world?
Who knows? Maybe it was a way for him to, I don't know, reclaim some power over a system that had held him captive for so long.
It's a strange twist, that's for sure.
It is. And get this, we learned that Berta often asked about Warden White, even considered him one of the greatest men he'd ever known.
Wow, really? That's kind of heartwarming in a weird way. Like this unlikely respect between a warden and a former inmate.
It's a reminder that human relationships are complicated, especially in situations like this.
Totally. But what really strikes me about the Leavenworth Seven's story is how their escape, it was so meticulously planned, but it all fell apart because of a bunch of random events.
Right. The muddy roads, the wrong cars, the unexpected encounters. It's almost comical.
It's like they were trying to control every detail, but life had other plans.
That's a good point. They were so focused on their original plan that they couldn't improvise, couldn't adapt when things went off script.
And ultimately, that rigidity was their downfall.
It's a good lesson for all of us, I think. We can plan all we want, but we have to be prepared for the unexpected.
So what's the takeaway here? Should we just throw our hands up and let fate decide?
Not exactly. It's not about giving up on planning or having goals. It's more about recognizing that things won't always go according to plan.
Being flexible, going with the flow.
Exactly. Sometimes the best stories come from those unexpected twists and turns.
Well, this has been a wild ride. The Leavenworth Seven story, it's got everything. Meticulous planning, muddy mishaps, shootouts, even a little bit of humor.
It's a reminder that history is full of surprises and that life is rarely predictable.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into this crazy chapter of history, don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more fascinating explorations. We'll see you next time.